Good evening, councillors, and good evening, staff members. And hello, clock. It's 5 o'clock. Look at that. It's only taken about 3 years to get that clock back up there. But doesn't it look good? Welcome to our special council meeting, and we'll open the meeting by acknowledging the Ngadjuri and the Kaurna people, the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. We have no apologies. We have Councillor Simon about 5 minutes on his way, so we have no apologies. From council perspective, are there any other apologies? If not, we have no leave of absence and no non-attendance. As you're all aware, this is a special council meeting tonight to continue our discussion from our previous meeting where we had a matter laying on the table, and we will bring that forward shortly, which we brought forward for discussion tonight. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce Richard, our CEO, for a presentation and an overview on what we talked about and where we are from last week. So thank you, Richard. If you could manage that.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bill, and I'll invite Nigel as well to come forward, and also to thank both Nigel and June for their input into this presentation. So fingers crossed this works this week.
Just might add, councillors, if we could save our questions till the presentation's over, it would be good.
Thank you. So again, this was, I'm going to present this one every time, the journey. So 10th meeting tonight, up from 9, 3 decisions last week. So, but we're well on our way, and we're certainly tracking in the right direction and on target for everything. So I'll just quickly flick through these. So we've obviously been through a couple so far in terms of the meeting. So that's where we're at tonight. Hopefully adopting some form of budget that we can put out to public consultation. And if required, we've got some audit and risk committee meetings that we can certainly get to if needed as part of this budget process. Hopefully we won't need that audit and risk committee meeting. And we can get to the 6th of June, where we would need a special council meeting to actually consider public submissions. We would have an update on our 2022-23 forecasted update, which will give us an idea on how we're tracking in relation to any surplus or deficit. And I think we're tracking towards a surplus at the moment. And then, of course, rate revenue forecasting for the future financial year, leading us to the 27th of June, which will be when we adopt, or hopefully we would adopt our annual business plan budget, declare the rates and all of those sort of things. So just a revenue recap. There we go. So we have our rating policy that has been adopted. Our rating strategy has equally been through the audit and risk committee. It has been presented at a council workshop and to council. Oops, that's right. The notion around that rating strategy was a low rate revenue, which I think we've landed on. The rating increase that we've got is significantly below inflation. We've placed a cap on the valuation, which will actually help with the cost increases at an individual level. And that's all resulted in an average cost per household of around about 80 cents per week. Now that household is more around the residential household. And in that revenue recap, we've actually seen a reduction of about $1.7 million on what was forecast in the long-term financial plan. Our expenses recap, our finance manager has actually done a significant review of our expenses prior to them coming to council for its consideration. The long-term financial plan equally, what we've put forward, there is a reduction of about nearly 2.5 million on what was shown in the long-term financial plan. There is a provision of about $300,000 in there as the rebate, which will help us fund that cap on the valuations. Employee costs are lower than what inflation was, so our employee costs are still extremely low, and there is a little bit of growth in our employee costs. Our energy and construction costs have been absorbed into the budget. Our employee costs as a percent of our total revenue. Now, our total revenue is what's shown in our operating statement, as well as any grant funding that we get. So if you try and do the two calculations, you will note that we equally use that additional amount, which, as I understand it, is what the Grants Commission would make its assessment on. And that chart there, it might be a little bit blurry, but the numbers generally over the last 5-6 years show our employee costs of somewhere between 31 and 34% of that revenue. 31% is about where we would be looking at tracking over the next year. Those numbers are, or Light Regional Council's number is a little bit below what we would see our surrounding councils, and there can be a variety of reasons for that. You will note there's probably a number in there for Clare and Gilbert, which in my view feels like it's a little bit out of whack. And there is obviously something that we can't see occurring at Clare because there are a range of issues across its overall budget, which we can't quite understand. But in the sort of 30 to 35% range is probably a figure that is quite consistent across a lot of councils. Nigel?
Just a bit of a refresher of some of the things we've already talked about, and a couple of new things. So I think I got the message pretty loud and clear from some people last meeting that a couple of the options are definitely off the table. So we're not going there. So this is the way the plan is structured is around that option 3, and the charges remain the same as what I discussed at the last meeting. One of the and it assumes the suggestion regarding that that high valuation increase at capped at 10% would continue to apply. So I'm sure most of you are aware that the rate in the dollar increase and that cap has a significant impact on individuals' amount of rates payable, but it does vary considerably depending on what their particular circumstances are. One of the suggestions was that there would be some benefit in pursuing some of the other rating structures of other councils, in that potentially better off, I suppose, in terms of other neighbours. I think I'm pretty sure that that would not be the case with the vast majority of our neighbours, whose average rates are considerably more than ours, but for various reasons, obviously. There seems to be some intelligence coming out of Barossa though at the moment, because they're probably reasonably well advanced in what they're doing, and there are a couple of options in their business plan that I've seen. So I just put some numbers together just to indicate what the worse off, better off might be in that regard. So probably talking about a fixed charge of $420 and a differential rate for residential of 0.3. Now that residential rate can't be compared with the regime here because it's the regime here is based on a minimum charge. What happens with that fixed charge is every ratepayer pays that before they pay anything else. In terms of residential, and I'll probably put this a little bit in reverse because it's pretty much the way it works. If this council went down that fixed charge route, and this is all things that particularly the last council saw in all the research that we provided regarding the rating policy. What would happen is that 21.2% of our residential ratepayers would be worse off. Simply the reason for that is that they're the lower value properties. So the lower value properties still pay the entire $420 fixed charge if that was the level, and then they pay the rate in a dollar above it. I think it was probably fairly clear to members, and this was briefly discussed, I suppose, when the policy was adopted in January. It was fairly clear to members that's not a particularly appropriate way to go for assuming that the lower value properties generally are probably the lower income people. So pushing higher charges onto them would be problematical. I'm not going to go through all of the land use codes, but also did primary production. Primary production is quite different to the residential structure. So what primary production shows is that only the top 2.3% of assessments here would be better off under that regime, which works out to 55 assessments out of a total of 2,347, of which if you were here, the assessments would 9 of those assessments would get the 10% cap to actually help it. So they would be better off. The vast majority would be worse off, and I think that's probably why the previous decision was made to stick with the current regime. But reminder that there's a qualifier on that, and recall that we wrote to the Valuer General, still haven't had a reply, which is disappointing. Wrote to the Valuer General concerning the research that showed that a lot of the values are probably at the lower end, they're inequitable. At the higher end, they're probably under. So we haven't had a reply, but until we're confident about the equity of those values, we probably need to keep revisiting that rating policy. I think I've said too much. And I thought it was useful just put the chart up again that I put up last time, and this is for the current year's rates. Just a reminder that there's a light in the middle. That red is the residential, and the light green is primary production. Clearly, light overall is on average lower than most in the primary production area, and around average to low in terms of residential. And I'd predict that if this low increase recommended budget is approved, light would be considerably below average next time we do these calculations. I've just put these in again, but I won't go through them in detail. These are the basis of the calculations, which we worked out our average residential and primary production properties and applied that to everybody else's rate in the dollar to come up with that chart that I just showed you. Possibly members have studied that in between meetings at their leisure. I love numbers. Okay, since the last meeting, we had a request from Councillor Michael, which got me thinking for a while. What this table is intended to show is what would it look like if we applied I think the challenge that we spoke about at the last meeting, in terms of what would it look like to achieve a 1%, 1.5%, 2%, 5% reductions. I think I certainly said at the last meeting, I'd be happy to take on a 1% challenge, feel a little bit more discomfort about some of the other ones, but anyway. What I did was I broke those percentages down into an employee cost component and an other operating cost component, because obviously employees have a different implication to other costs, and then came up with what those total cost reduction amounts would be. I've got 4 stars next to that line because I've excluded finance charges, because they're obviously set by our projected borrowings, and the borrowings aren't affected by employee costs. They're affected by what we've committed to in our capital program, and also excludes depreciation. There's not much we can do about that whilst we continue to produce assets, infrastructure assets in particular. And I just notionally calculated what the average full-time equivalent reduction might be in any year, but of course we have to appreciate that any reduction in the staff from a no cost perspective could only be done by attrition. That's why I gave 2 options there. I said, well, this is what the cost would be, the numbers would be in terms of that cost reduction, but on a 6-month sort of attrition average, which doesn't necessarily occur in the place you want it to occur, that's what the numbers would be, which I would assume at the higher end, where we're talking 5%, that would certainly have a significant impact on service delivery. The other part of the exercise is I needed to abide by the question that was asked in terms of dividing the services into discretionary and non-discretionary. So I just put up the non-discretionary to start with. Part of it was about, well, we're going to keep that capital program, so you need to keep the staff who are involved in that working 100% and more. There's a couple of stars on some of those because they're funded by service charges. So the service charges basically equal the costs of running those services. So there's probably no point in looking at those in terms of the budget structure. And then I think all of the others are probably self-explanatory in terms of the other legislative requirements that we've got to do, except for, I suppose, the last one, which is thrust on us. Roseworthy Township expansion. It's going to happen. I keep driving past and seeing it grow. And they're going to expect service delivery. What I did was just a quick table based on all those assumptions before. This table is the discretionary services, and anybody involved in those discretionary services shouldn't look right now. But the first amount, the net budget, that's the non-salary component of those budgets, and then the salary component, and then the total cost. So we're talking something like about 1.5 million across the organisation in terms of what was defined as discretionary. We need a new one of these, do I? And that's it.
Sure, Aaron. So yeah, thank you very much, Nigel. So now we'll just touch on some budget highlights which have been presented so far. It is a $17,000 surplus, which is a very modest surplus, and you know, I think we should be quite pleased with that. It is a total of a $736,000 improvement on what was forecast in the long-term financial plan. Interest rate increases are included in the assumption, so we've already factored that in. A small surplus each year of the long-term financial plan beyond this year. So again, you know, we are looking at the long-term financial plan and making sure we are being responsible beyond just this year. There's no new borrowing is planned. Again, a good thing for the council to try and contain those financial costs or financing costs and the impacts of any future rate rises. The minimum rate of $925 an increase of 2.8%. 605 of those assessments, or 605 of our assessments, will be eligible or will be at the minimum rate, which is about 8% of our overall assessments of council. So it's again about on target according to our rating policy, which suggested a target of about 10%. So we're pretty close from that point of view. Our general rates, about 3% increase after the rebate. So again, quite modest in the scheme of things. Our IAMP continues to be fully funded, so it's a good position for us to be in. There was an increase in capital works for next year, increase in value of our capital works. Our services are maintained. That is really important, that we have that stability across our council of the services that our community expect and would prefer to see maintained. Our budget, in our view, is financially balanced. It is financially responsible. It is financially sustainable to continue along the lines that we have proposed. This is a slide that I've previously shown of our foundation projects. It was one of the first that I put up. At the last 2 or 3 times that you saw this, I hadn't done anything with that bottom line that I've now highlighted in green. But our foundation must be to match our services as we grow, and the budget that we've presented will do that. Some considerations as you go through your deliberations tonight. If the budget that is presented, if the budget that is looked to be adopted is at great variance to that of which the Audit and Risk Committee has seen, it could be appropriate for us to go back to the Audit and Risk Committee for their commentary on that budget. This year we do, in 23-24, we will be part of the ASCOSA strategic review, where they go through and carefully consider all of our strategic documents, including the adoption of our budget. Where that budget, in its view, would be short of where it should be, or where it considers that it is unsustainable, or where it considers that council is not raising the right amount of revenue or investing in its services, I would suspect it will have commentary on it, and I would expect it, from what we've seen this year, of other councils to be negative. There is a sustainability statement in the annual business plan, and again, depending on which way we go, we would need to look at updating that, as well as looking at other components of our annual business plan to ensure that any adjustment in the dollars that might come into or out of the budget are still appropriate and the services can be delivered. So services, you can cut, you can reduce, you can retain, you can grow, but either way, we have to consult. And our community would expect us to be consulting on any major changes to those services that are being currently provided. And the other thing is the strategic plan project that we are looking at, in my view, would be an appropriate time for us to actually consider those service changes, as that will be the project where we bring the community along for that journey, to actually think about what it is that they're wanting, not just on a one-year basis, but on an ongoing basis. Which leaves us with the recommendation that is currently laying on the table. And with that, I conclude my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Nigel, also for excellent presentations and the reminder as to where we're at the moment. And it was good to hear some examples of some of the questions that were raised from the previous meeting being answered this evening as well. Councillors, the next matter we need to resolve is, we have a matter laying on the table. I'd ask if someone would like to move that this matter be brought forward for discussion. Councillor Dean and Councillor Fabio, is there any discussion or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? We're bringing it off the table that we put on the table. All those in favour? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. I'm going to allow 20 minutes or so for discussion. So if we can temper our questions, and so it gives everyone a chance to have an opportunity to have a say. I'll open it up for discussion now. Firstly, I'll have to suspend meeting procedures to do this. So could I have someone move that we suspend our meeting procedures? Councillor Dean and Councillor Fabio, all those in favour?
A time in that, the 20 minutes. So I'm moving that we suspend
Yeah,
for 20 minutes and review.
For 20
that time
minutes.
if we need to.
For 20 minutes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the early budget.
5 minutes. Trouble is, it's still 5 o'clock by that clock.
Oh. I will, I'll drop time on.
For a time of 20 minutes, that's the minor amendment to that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So I'll open up for discussion now, councillors, if you have any questions or things you'd like to raise. Councillor Simon.
If I just want to start with one question, please, to the presentation that we have from our CEO, because he said that the state average of the percentage of employee cost of the whole revenue base is sort of average 33%, I think you said. And then you said that ours is close to that, but unless I'm doing something wrong, my calculation is it comes out at 40%. So because I'm looking at the thing in your plan, and that this blue part is definitely 40% of the whole wheel. So I'm just wondering what's going on there.
Yeah, no, thank you. In the presentation, I made commentary about it includes all revenue, which includes grant funding. So what's in there is it as a percentage of the operating costs, but it actually is all of our revenue, which includes the grant funding as well. So that is the calculation that the Grants Commission actually use when they're assessing and reporting on our council.
Other questions, councillors? Councillor Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. So my question relates to the presentation, in particular, Nigel, for your slide on discretionary service impact analysis. So my question is, there's an amount of about $265,000 noted for tourism development. I just wonder what, if someone might be able to explain how that would be spent in the coming business plan. And then my second, well, I've got a couple. Probably the same question applies to biodiversity and sustainability and economic development.
You're asking Councillor Michael how it's going to be spent.
Yes.
The breakdown of that, in other words.
Yeah, well, look, in a sense, but not, I don't need to see another spreadsheet, but if someone can explain, yeah, we've got a net budget of 131,000 for tourism development plus the salaries, so that's 265. What are we doing for the 265? And I guess the same question applies to biodiversity and economic development.
Can we have someone to be able to provide some response to that?
Yeah, comment I can make is that we're effectively implementing the tourism plan for the council, so it'll be all the actions within the tourism plan.
Yeah, so you're able to elaborate on what some of the feature actions would be? what some of the highlights would be.
Oh, probably not off the top of my head tonight, but I could certainly respond to that.
I think that the tourism plan has been adopted by council, so it would have been discussed before it was adopted.
Has it been adopted as part of this council or?
Well, it's a current document, it's a current working document, so
Yeah.
I assume that there's always a carryover of some description.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious to know what the, if we look back in 12 months' time, how would we, what would we celebrate in terms of the achievements for the 265 tourism development?
Oh, no, very fair question. I'm just wondering if we could relate back to the document that we've got. That might answer a fair few of those questions.
Yes, I'm happy if someone wants to enlighten me on what the features of that are, but I haven't had the opportunity to read it.
Just through the chair, Councillor Michael, while this little session is on, we'll get some information so we can provide a response to you in it.
It doesn't have to be, like to tic tacs, but just a high level.
Oh, no, it's a very fair question. And I think that those three matters are quite fair. Because I'm thinking back, of course, they were adopted by a previous council.
Yeah.
So you've got every reason not to be familiar with the documents.
Megan can sustainability.
Oh, Megan may be able to answer the question on the biodiversity and
Yeah, great.
sustainability. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you through the chair. The salaries is one person. But with the actual budget itself, I can tell you that we have a sustainability and action plan strategy that's been adopted by council. So we've got $62,000 per year for that. In those strategies, we've got $25,000 in tree planting program that we're doing. Just working through some of the big ticket items that are in this budget. We have contributions to the Gawler River floodplain management. That's $36,500. No, that's the bottom. They were and we've also got the contractors that work on the biodiversity, the native vegetation that we've got that is in line with strategic documents. We've also got, a few contributions that we have to, for example, the Seppetsfield Road Business Alliance for the Don Helbig Conservation Reserve. We pay money to different community groups to help us with that as well. And then the contractors that go with that.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay, so that makes up to 221 in broad terms.
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Michael.
Yeah, I don't want to consume the time, but I think this is a great activity that, because it's only one person who does a significant amount of coordination across the region, if the salary component there was lost, there would be a significant amount of that net budget that would actually go with it, because you just wouldn't deliver it. It's a person who gets quite a bit of grant funding through the NRM and delivers it. Now, what we just heard was there was a couple of things there, not large amounts, but around about $40,000, which is actually pre-committed already. So the $5,000 to Don Helbig and the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority contributions are ones that we wouldn't actually get out of. So yes, they are discretionary, but we're actually committed through our involvement on others.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you,
I mean,
Richard.
at best, that accounts for about a quarter of the net budget. There's still another 150 in there. And yeah, the third one was just on economic development. ED 305. Probably more so the net budget. Well, I think that what the overall strategy is, what the payoff is for the 283, 284. Yeah, so I mean, what are our highlight achievements for this coming business plan? Or what are the things that there must be 3 or 4 things surely that we're targeting on delivering. Yeah, but if you had to highlight 3 or 4, what would they be?
Well, I think it's just general growth in tourism and economic development. So if you look at the macro indicators, how many visitors we're getting to the regions, For tourism development, it's achieving the state's goals in terms of visitation spend to reach their regional target for 2025.
Yep.
So there's 5 key priority areas that we're working on all the time. So it's essentially working on all those facets, working with partners, whether they be Regional Development Australia, South Australian Tourism Commission, Barossa Australia, all those entities. There's marketing and promotional activities. There's I guess development of signage across the region.
That's funded separately though. That's the Light Regional Council, Light Country signs, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a
I guess
separate
it does need to be project managed and delivered by staff,
Yep.
whether it be approvals, implementing the Light Country branding, but also the corporate branding throughout that product. So there's checks and balances that sort of need to be put in place. Social media marketing, engagement with industry bodies and businesses. Yeah, so I guess it's difficult to achieve, well, state a few key priorities when the work that we do is across so many areas. That makes sense.
Thanks, Conrad. Anything further, councillor Michael?
Not at the moment, thanks, yeah. Down there, Bill.
Further questions, councillors? Councillor Dean.
I noticed in your, this is to Nigel, in your list of discretionary and non-discretionary items, you didn't have, as I could see, infrastructure like road maintenance. Was that, my understanding is that actually comes under discretionary, even though it's an essential service. Is that correct?
Councillor Dean, the listing there was in accordance with the question that was asked, not my definition of discretionary or non-discretionary. So everything related to
So
capital works was excluded.
that's not every discretionary item you've got listed there.
It would not be my version of discretionary, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Dean. Thank you, Nigel. Further questions, councillors? Councillor Dean?
Just one other one. If we were to reduce the rate increase, say from 3% to 1% or 2% overall, and actually take that off rather than redirect it, is it true to say that that would have an impact every year thereafter in the long-term financial plan? In that you've taken it out, then if you're going to put it back again, you've got to have an increase over above whatever other increase we might need to have to cover increases in costs and so on. Is that correct?
Thanks, Nigel.
Council, that's exactly correct. And there's a compounding effect across that plan. So that's probably why the CEO referred to the aspect of sustainability. That in terms of the original recommendation regarding a rate increase, I thought I was at pains to explain that this is an extraordinary year for our ratepayers. A key element of sustainability is avoiding volatility in the charges we impose upon them. And I would have thought that in terms of that quality of the decision, that this year would be the year that you try and restrain. And the growth of 3% in revenue is not what individuals necessarily will experience. Some will experience somewhat less than that. I suppose the key point, though, is that there are a couple of key points is that there is risk in that. The risk and the assumptions is that inflation will come down, as Reserve Bank and others are suggesting. The risk is related to that interest rates are going to come down. That's the factors we've built into this plan. If inflation doesn't come down and we're faced with further construction costs, you have a another multiplier effect. If interest rates don't come down as we've assumed, and we're fairly conservative because we're still assuming another 0.25% increase yet. If they don't come down in the long term, that will come back. That will come back to bite, and that multiplier will come back to make us even further behind, as I think you suggested.
Thank you, Nigel. I hope that answers the question willingly.
Yeah, just following that, I suppose the long-term financial plan said we should have got 1.7 million this year. So the long-term financial plans aren't always accurate, are they? So using them as they don't work, do they really? Because that's what's got us in the pickle now, isn't it? Wasn't it 1.7 different than what it was 3 years ago?
Well, I think the whole notion of the long-term financial plan is at the time trying to, with some level of confidence, forecast what it is you believe the income will be, and getting those assumptions right. Now, that's the beauty of the long-term financial plan. I think what we've got at the moment is we're forecasting some very modest surpluses going out. Each year, though, we should be trying to bring in a balanced budget, and I think that's what we've done. So yes, we may see some things go up and down, but as we get closer to the time, we should have a greater level of certainty.
All right. So why was the 1.7 million difference? What caused that?
I might deflect to Nigel if he's able to answer that question.
Off the top of my head, that would be a multitude of factors. I have to go and summarise those. I think CEO, it's probably also worth reflecting. I'm old enough, and there's probably some others that have been around on that when we used to do annual budgets. And they got us into a lot of trouble, those annual budgets at times, because life changed. And I'm talking about times when interest rates went up to 18% and we got absolutely clobbered with an annual budget approach. So a longer term view and a long-term financial plan evolved out of that era when employee costs were leaping ahead. As I said, interest rates. So it provides, it's not an exact science, but it provides parameters where you can reasonably manage some of those risks.
Because there wasn't as many rateable assessments as you predicted 3 years ago.
It could be one of the factors, yes.
Well, it's 1.7 million. You must have a reason for why you're using it as a thing, and then you don't know why. And then we're asked to rely on the long-term plan. If we're going to change the amount we're paying now, it's going to affect the future, and we don't know what the ones we used in the past haven't worked out to be as budgeted. So imagine, as I'm saying, there's a failing in not a failing in the budget. The budgets are always right, but the budget's just a budget. It's just an estimate of what's going to happen. So if we change what the rate is today, it will affect the long-term budget. But who cares? Because the long-term budget doesn't always work. As example of this one.
Anything further, councillors? We respond to Colin's question there. If I'm assuming that was a question, Colin.
Mayor Bill, I think I'd also reiterate what I said at the last meeting, and that is, and it's related to the question, and that is, why do you find yourself in a position to be able to have such a low rate increase and yet maintain services and have an increase in the capital works program? And it's simply because the chickens came home this financial year, and that water scheme got paid out. Huge reduction in the debt, massive reduction in our interest. If we were faced with still carrying all of that debt and these increasing interest rates, this year would have been a bad year. And that's that's a crucial part of some of the expenditure changes.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. I think just getting back to Colin's question, Councillor Colin's question in relation to the long-term financial plan. I think it was questioning the reliability or questioning the need. Was that the case?
Oh, no, I'm not questioning the need of them. I think they are needed. I'm just saying it's not an exact science. So,
Oh, no.
you know, it can be very variable. So if we do make a change in the rateable income now, it will affect the future, but who cares? It's just a budgetary thing which
Yeah.
we have to abide by, and it has to be done. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done.
No, you're saying we shouldn't rely too heavily on it, though. That's fair comment. Any further questions, councillors? Right, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was just going to add to that, Councillor Colin, that you can only apply the assumptions that are known at the time of developing the long-term financial plan. So as Nigel's pointed out, we only know the boiler water reuse scheme is paid out now and can calculate that exactly to come up with that variance. Also, we couldn't, 3 years ago, we wouldn't have known about the impact that inflation would have on the economy with the Ukraine war. So you just design a long-term financial plan with the assumptions you can apply at the time of developing. So naturally, it may change due to extenuating circumstances. Yes, so, yeah. Thank you.
Councillors, our 20 minutes is up, but I think this has been a really good discussion, so I'd like to extend that for further 10 minutes for any further questions that might come. There have been really good questions, and thank you for staff members for the answers to or the responses to them. Councillor Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. So this budget scheme is something I've been ruminating over a little bit, and then I guess this is a question about both a question and a comment. So, yeah, in the absence of that, the sense that I get is that the financial picture might look a little bit different. So is that not then a case for further fiscal conservatism in the council? Because I mean that that's maybe not a windfall in an accounting sense, but it's sort of a one-off, right? And I don't know where the stage 2 of it is. I'm still getting my head around it. So, you know, is that and not a further reason to take a more conservative view of how we're spending our money as a council? I mean, in the absence of that, I mean, what would it look like?
Just through the chair, I think what I could probably say in terms of the journey that council has gone on over the last decade in relation to the Bunyip One scheme, and that is that it was the catalyst to bring the services and the standard of those services up to a level which, in my observations, our community have expected and deserve. I think it would be fair to say this council is now in a position where, if it undertakes responsible rating and responsible financial management, it can maintain its services from this point going forward to that particular standard. Had we not undertaken Bunyip, our asset management plan would look substantially different to what it does, and we would be probably, in my view, still 15 years away from being able to seal our township streets, which would be a significant impost on our ratepayers, and the amount of grant funding that has come in on top of the Bunyip. And bear in mind, a lot of the money, the additional money that Bunyip brought in, we actually used grant funding in addition to it. So there were projects that were delivered that we didn't use a cent of council's rate money from or for.
Thanks very much, Richard. That's a good overview. Any further questions, councillors?
Oh, yeah, if you're.
Yeah, Councillor Bill.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, if we didn't have Bunyip, we would have budgeted differently and we
Oh.
wouldn't have provided the services, but Bunyip provided an opportunity to change our budgeting structure. So the fact that it's gone now means we've just got to budget with what we've got. It's like it's like we won the lottery, we've spent that money wisely, so now we've got a budget without the lottery.
Actually, I can clearly remember the night that the council adopted the motion to proceed with Bunyip 1. It was a new council, believe it or not, and one of our existing councillors stood up, who was very well respected. No names at this stage, but and he talked very favourably toward that, toward a massive sort of debt of 11.5 million borrowing from the financial authority, and it got up, and we're in this position today. And there's one person in the room here too, which I think could take a lot of credit for driving that project, is Kyron Chappell. And Kyron, you did an absolutely amazing job engineering that. That's his level of position in the organisation at that stage, and he drove that Bunyip project to obviously a great conclusion. So thanks, Kyron, for all your effort, and the team behind you as well. It was extremely well orchestrated, and it never steered away from where it was supposed to be. So we've been very fortunate. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Simon?
I would like just to make some comments, if I may. As Nigel pointed out, this is a very fair budget, and we're in a good position to deliver what we do. However, we are in a sort of a circumstances where there's high inflationary pressure to the normal people, and I think we as a council should not contribute to that. We are not with 3% increase. That's lower than the inflation, but the more we can contribute against inflation is a good thing. That's one thing. The other thing that I think we need to think about is we should set ourselves apart from GOLA, like this whole boundary thing. If you talk to people, they don't care about the lines. What they care about is, are we going to pay more rates if you're in Glyde, or if you're going to pay less rates? Like the people in Hewitt, they don't care which one it is. They just, where do we pay more rates and where do we get better services? So if we keep our services as we are, which we will, and keep our rates low, that is definitely a benefit in this whole boundary thing. And since you put it up as one of our main strategic things, I think this is definitely one point that if we drive this, that's a good thing. So, but having said all this, there's still stuff in there that people wouldn't miss. And I mean, I've been saying this many times, but this whole tourism development thing, I think this, in my opinion, is just, people wouldn't miss it. Like there's no need for that. This is not a place for people to come. We got the Barossa, which is a perfect brand, and we support the RDA, and we support Tourism Australia. They can brand the Barossa, they can do all that. They're doing fine. I'm not sure what we are spending, $265,000 on tourism development for. I think that's just, it's a madness. This is not a tourism place. I've never met a tourist, like, I mean, there's some great nomads and whatever, but there's no international tourism coming to Freeling or to wherever. It's like, that's a shock. So that's one thing. And the other thing, there's a fair bit of consultants working there. Again, like this economic development consultants, $126,000. I'm not, it says implementation of ED plan and medium-term program. I have no idea what that is. To me, that seems sort of wasteful. So I'm just thinking, this is a great budget, but if it can be even better, why not? I don't think we need to cut any service, and there's stuff in there that nobody would miss. Like I said, this tourism, economic development, and we could easily, just with those two items, we could easily get the 400 grand out of there, and we would have 2% reduction. So I think that's what we should be doing.
Thanks, Councillor Simon. Councillor Dean?
Mayor Bill, I'd like to give a bit of an answer to that. As a council, we have to provide, and Richard mentioned this, a balanced budget which looks after and acknowledges the needs of all sectors of the community, one of which is our tourism operators. And there are none on our council, but we've got to represent them just as well as we represent farmers, of whom we've got quite a few on our council. And so just because we don't think it's important doesn't mean it's not important. And I think it's important to realise that we have to govern for all members of our community, including those involved in tourism. It is a growing area of our council. income. It's got a lot of potential not realised. And therefore, I think to cut that would be short-sighted and also would fail the fairness test, in my view.
Thanks, councillor Dean.
Kyron has just informed me that under tourism development, there are contributions to organisations such as RDA, Barossa Light, Gawler Adelaide Plains, and equally contributions to Barossa Australia as part of it. So again, within that net budget, there are actually commitments that this council, within your 120 decisions that you've made, have been made. So again, it isn't the full amount which would be available, but a portion. So,
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Councillor Simon.
If I may respond to what we just heard, because tourism delivers about 3% to our gross regional product, 3%. So of course you have to be equitable, but if you have to be equitable, we have to be equitable against, according to the spectrum of who contributes what to the economy. So $265,000, that's whatever we contribute, that's more than 3% as a share of what we contribute. So yeah, I fully see that we need to be equitable, but this is not equitable. We invest more into one bit than in the other. Tourism is this tiny little sliver of income for this council and of economic activity. So.
Thanks, councillor Simon. I think we're almost to our 10 minutes. Councillor Collins.
I'd just like to, with Simon's point about the Gawler Council, having a lower rates. It was interesting. I was talking to some farmers the other day, which Dean and I and Megan met, and I was speaking to them again the other day, and they've got land in the Gilbert Valley Council, and they've got land in our council area, and they were telling me that their rates are substantially lower in the Gilbert Valley, and there's a group of them around that area who are thinking about actually getting a petition together and asking for a boundary change. So they want to go that way because they think that the roads on that side, they trim them better. As I explained to us that day, they trim better the roads, in their opinion, look after better.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd actually like to bring in the boundary. So it is a point that if we do have higher rates than neighbouring councils, some people might want to actually look at moving.
So, yeah, I think councillor Collins, that when we looked at the comparable rates to our neighbours, it was only Clare and Gilbert Valley that were lower, and Mount Barker, I think, in primary production. That was it. All the rest of them were far higher than we are.
But but the Gilbert Valley one is, like, we're a rural council, and I think that we can't forget that Barossa is a big beast, and it's a different thing. And I think our rates are actually higher with that $400. If you're a residential person, you'd probably pay more in the Barossa, but a prime producer is probably paying more in our council, I'd say.
Yeah, thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Bill.
Colin, I've got Councillor Collins. Sorry, I've got land in the Adelaide Plains area, and that is a lot higher than the light area. So perhaps we should push further to Adelaide Plains to get a lower rate. It's a 0.38, 0.4 of the rate. It's a lot higher in Adelaide Plains.
I guess when we're looking at spending money, there's an argument for everything, isn't there? Councillors, I think we've done our time. I've been really impressed with our discussion. I think there's been some excellent questions. It's probably time now that we go back to our formal meeting. And I'd like to perhaps someone would like to move a motion that we do that. Councillor Dean.
I'll move that. Thanks.
Someone like to second that? We move back in. Councillor Fabio. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillors, it brings us back to the recommendation from the previous meeting from the ARC, which is the the Audit Risk Committee. Pardon me, memory blank. That is on the front page of your agenda. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, someone like to second that? Can we get that up there? Sorry, ladies. Oh. That's the one. So I have a mover. Would someone like to second that motion? Councillor Lynn? Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Dean?
Thank you, Mayor Bill. I don't want to say much because I think the summary that Richard and Nigel gave reminded us why it is a responsible budget that's balanced, stable, predictable, and yet for the last 2 years we've actually had a reduction in real terms because inflation has been higher than our rate increase. So we're moving our rate increases responsibly, and we have a budget that I believe is balanced and responsible and fair to all sections of the community. And we do have the option within our budget reviews and so on to redistribute funds within that budget should we choose to. So I know there's been some suggestions made about redistributing funds, any savings that we can make towards ward projects or special projects of one kind or another, which of course we need a mechanism if we're going to do that. But that flexibility is there. I'm concerned that if we change the total amount of the revenue to a smaller number, that will come back to bite us in later years. The long-term financial plan is established to ensure sustainability financially going into the future. And I recall when I first got on the council, when the idea first came in, and we were unsustainable, and we set up a plan by the long-term financial plan to become sustainable in 10 years because we were $3.5 million down the tube. And we actually, I think, achieved that in about 6 or 7. And so combination of factors there, budget being one of them. And therefore, I'm strongly believe that this is a good budget and we should put it out for consultation, and bearing in mind that that's all we're doing, and that if feedback coming back suggests we make some changes, we will, as we have done in the past.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. Councillor Lynn, would you like to make any comment?
Yes, sir. You come back to us. It's the public have had their say, and there's nothing to stop us from changing things once. That's why I second it, because we can change anything we like according to what the public want.
Councillors, are there anyone like to speak to the motion? Councillor Michael?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mayor Bill. Look, my view is that you know, it would be good to see some further tension applied in the budget, and I'd like to see further community input into how the money is spent. And I know that opportunity sort of comes with respect to Councillor Dean, you know, through the process that that follows. I do agree that based on the analysis that Nigel's presented, for the most part, any revenue increase, say in the order of 1 to 2% in particular, would probably have an immaterial impact on rates for the majority of people. It's fair to say, based on that analysis, I think the average rate decrease for residential property at 2% reduction in revenue would be about 80 cents per week. I appreciate everyone's circumstances are different, but I think for the most part, for most people, given the appreciation we've seen in property values, it's probably not money well spent. That said, I won't be voting for the motion as presented. I have an alternative proposal that I'd like to put forward. That can be put forward either as an amendment. I think it's probably material enough, perhaps, that it needs to be a new motion, but fundamentally, that proposal is that we apply a 2% reduction to expenditure generally for the 2023-24 financial year, excluding non-discretionary expenditure and committed capital works. That those funds are redirected toward projects which would effectively be projects that are endorsed by the elected body, that would follow from the community consultation that is still to come, and that they're projects that provide broad community and social benefits. So, not just for ratepayers, but for the broader community that live in the Light Regional Council area. And then following the community consultation period, or the conclusion of it, the Chief Executive provides a report for decision no later than the August 23 Ordinary Council meeting that provides recommendations for those projects. And in the meantime, I'd hope that the elected members get out amongst their communities and get some feedback that can be brought to the chamber as well. So that's my proposal, and that's probably the main reason I can't vote for this motion in favour of it, or I can move an amendment. I guess I'll be guided on that.
The amendment would be what? Not all of that.
In substance, most of it, but we can word it how we like.
Gary, just some guidance in that, please, if you could.
Thank you, through the chair. We've moved this motion and you've spoken to this motion, so you wouldn't move you would have moved an amendment prior to that. So you would be putting this motion first and then looking at another alternative if it doesn't get through. Thank you.
I didn't quite catch that.
So this one wins.
Right, okay. Thanks, Gary. Are there any further questions or comments, Councillor Simon?
Yes, I mean, I agree with what Councillor Michael said. I just want to, with the danger of repeating myself, the way a budget should be done, and we've been told that many times, is to first come up and figure out what the costs are, what's the expenses, what's the services you want to do, all this complicated business, what do we want to do? And then we come up with a figure, and then we go out and apply a rate to the dollar to actually pull in that figure. Now, we still haven't done that in reality. In reality, we've been talked about rates in the dollars for a long time, and it's been really helpful and really educational, and I've totally appreciated that. Nothing wrong with that. But the other side just hasn't had enough time. It really hasn't. We had one workshop where we had barely any input, like some silly, Survey Monkey things. It's just like whatever, and we really didn't have the impact. And that's why we had all these questions over the email. That's why we had these meetings, all this sort of stuff going on. So I really don't think that the way this has been worked it was very helpful or efficient. So what I want to do, I will. That's my first point. The second point is this is exactly the same thing that we voted on a week ago. So I mean, obviously, and nothing has changed. So it seems totally pointless, like we've talked about it, but we're still at the same point. Like, what's that good for? So no, I won't be able to vote for this, and hopefully, we get Councillor Michael's motion up, and we'll see how that goes.
Thanks, Councillor Simon. Any further questions or comments?
Could I put this motion, please?
Can you
Put
the motion?
Yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you, through the chair. That is a formal motion, so that will need to be dealt with. So
Right.
we'll need a mover and seconder. So we've got our mover on the formal motion of putting it.
And I've got a seconder, Councillor Simon. So we've got a formal motion to put the motion, the first motion of Councillor Dean, Councillor Nett's motion. That's correct? You're all comfortable with that, councillors? We're voting. Yeah, we've. Yeah. Yeah, we've got to vote on your motion. The formal motion takes precedence.
So through the chair, councillor Collin has put a formal motion.
That's
which
gotta
is
be
a
dealt with
formal motion
first.
that it's put. So that's the one we're dealing with on the table at the moment. So councillor Collin is the mover, councillor Simon is the seconder, so that the motion be put.
Yep.
So we're just doing that one now. So if you'd like to see if there's approval of that.
Right, so I've got a mover and I've got a seconder. Are all clear what the motion is?
That the question be put. So
All those in favour? Those against? That's carried.
now we put the motion.
Now we'll put the motion of councillor Dean and councillor Net. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is lost. So I'm looking for councillor Michael's motion now.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. So I'd like to move a motion that, and I'll provide the text to carry for a benefit. The council approve the 2023-24 annual budget, annual business plan and 23 to 2033 long-term financial plan for public consultation subject to the following. A, an amount equal to 2% of total expenditure for the 23-24 financial year, excluding non-discretionary expenditure and capital works projects, is redirected to ward projects. B, for the purpose of this motion, ward projects are projects specifically endorsed by the elected body based on community consultation and will include, for example, projects that provide broad community and social benefits. And C, direct the Chief Executive Officer or his delegate to provide a report for decision no later than the August 23 Ordinary Council meeting that provides recommendations for proposed ward projects following community consultation.
Thanks, councillor Michael. You've got that written up? Yeah, just for, oh, okay. Gee, that was pretty good.
Just
It
a point
was
of, was that 2%, Michael? You say 2% reduction?
Okay, councillors, were you clear on councillor Michael's motion there? I have a mover, but I'm for a seconder to that motion. Councillor Allison, would you like to speak to that? Yeah.
Sorry, through the chair. I think it's pretty self-explanatory and I'm quite supportive of that.
Thanks, councillor Allison. I think you may have already. Yeah. Thanks, councillor Michael. Questions, councillor Dean?
Thank you, Mayor Bill. I'm in favour of this motion generally to the extent that the total amount of funding is hasn't changed and we're looking at a redistribution. The mechanism of that will be something will need to be worked out. But my question is, just looking at some of the figures that Nigel gave that suggest it could have an impact on staffing. If we're going to redirect funds towards ward projects and do public consultation on these, that's going to be our staff impact in terms of staff needed and delivery of projects, which I'm sure some of those were capital projects, will be a staff requirement. And so I'm assuming that when you're talking about redirecting funds to those projects, that as the same rules would apply in terms of capitalisation of staffing for capital projects as occurs currently, so that some of that funds could be actually paid in staff to deliver those projects that we've decided we need to deliver. Is that a fair comment?
Thanks, councillor Dean. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, look, I think that there are a number of complexities in looking at the motion that is here right at the moment. The first one being one of my comments was about referring this matter back to the Audit and Risk Committee This is a change that is at variance to what the Audit and Risk Committee saw. It will be a change to the services that would be provided. And in my observations, this motion as it is in parts A, B and C can remain. However, I believe council should be putting this matter back to the Audit and Risk Committee with the impacts to the budget, irrespective of what the ward projects are. That is fine, but I think the impacts in other parts of the budget will be there. There will be no doubt about that at all. To take $500,000 or $400,000 to $500,000 out of the budget and redirect it without an impact to existing services, I think will need to be carefully looked at and taken back through the Audit Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I think that's pretty good advice. The Audit Committee would be expecting us to do that. I can't see why they wouldn't. Councillor Fabio?
Thank you. I've been patiently waiting. Just through the chair, a couple of questions for Councillor Michael. The 2% figure, how did you come about 2%? And secondly, how would the prioritisation and allocation of funds, how would that be calculated? What would that look like as far as these discretionary spends? You know, is it the person that shouts the loudest? Is it the person that forgets him first? I mean, you know, how are we careful not to consume all that 2% in, say, the first 6 months or whatever, and then leave nothing to the tail end?
Thanks, Councillor Fabio. Councillor Michael?
Thanks, Mayor Bill, through the chair. So 2 good questions. Thank you, Councillor Fabio. So I guess the 2% was based on a spectrum of analysis that I asked the council staff to prepare, which Nigel's shared with us this evening. So, there was a range of figures. There was 1, 1.5, 2, and then up to 5%. I guess I took the view that the 2% represented value based on, I know that some will disagree, but based on what I've seen, I think it's achievable without too material an impact on services. And I'm happy to receive reports from council staff on that. So that's how I came to a view on the 2%. I felt that going beyond that might be a bridge too far, excuse the pun, and I think going less than that might not deliver the kind of result that I hope we can achieve with it. To the second question, I think the way that the motion is worded implies that the benefit should be spread as broadly as possible and provide community and social benefits. So I guess in my mind's eye, I can anticipate a scenario where if it's $500,000, as Richard indicates, that is broadly spread between the 3 wards that we have, or broken down further into the community centres, so that I don't want to name any in particular for the sake of missing any, but it would be a bad situation for it to all be centred in Kapunda, as an example. It would be better to see it, in Kapunda, in Greenock, in Wasleys, in Hewitt, in Roseworthy, in a broad spectrum of the area. And I think that's what I've got in my mind when I came up with this motion, and ultimately it'll be for this elected body to decide.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Michael. Further questions, councillors? No further questions. I might put Councillor Dean.
I'm just, it is a question is whether the reference referral to the Audit Committee needs to be in the motion, or whether that will happen as a matter of obvious responsibility. Just want some guidance on that.
I think we need to go to the Audit Committee.
Yeah, I think the Audit Committee is the appropriate committee of council to review what is going on public consultation if it's a, significant variance to what was presented to it.
That didn't really answer my question, Richard. Should it be in the motion or not?
I think for completeness, it looks much better that it is in the motion. I think it gives the Audit and Risk Committee confidence that council is giving regard to the work that committee does. So I would say yes.
Another question then, Richard, would the mover and seconder be happy to include that as a point D?
Thanks, councillor Michael.
Yeah, just responding just quickly. I mean, as someone that is on the Audit and Risk Committee, the inference I drew from the discussion with the independent members at the last meeting is that they don't see their function as exercising an opinion over how council necessarily spends its money. It sees its role as, I guess, ensuring that we're meeting our statutory obligations as a council. And its viability, I suppose, overall. I don't see that the independent members in particular have too much of an interest in how whether we divert funding from one part of our expenditure into ward projects or somewhere else. Yeah, that my concern is that it now goes back to another committee. Presumably that means it doesn't go to community consultation following tonight's meeting, and then it's further delayed. But I'm all for governance, and if that's what we think we need to do, so be it. But my view is, and I'm happy to take advice from others, I don't know that that's the function of the Audit and Risk Committee.
Councillor Michael, I tend to agree with you. I sit on the Audit Committee also. The only thing that bothered me a little bit there, that the original motion did say adjusted for minor amendments. I would think in the total overall budget, you could say this is a minor amendment. And it's really an operational matter more so than a procedural matter of how Audit Committee oversee. This is what you rightly said, it's what council do. So I don't think it would need to go back, in my opinion, but I stand to be corrected. Councillor Fabio.
I, through the chair, I too am on that committee, and I concur 100% with what Michael has said. At the end of the day, I do believe that the total figure that we're looking at raising and from the community, and the rate side of it, how it's raised and whatever, is not necessarily being changed here. Just that distribution internally of the funds, which I don't believe needs scrutiny of the Audit and Risk Committee, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. I just think we're bogging down the process.
I think, thanks very much, Councillor Fabio. I'll rest my case and perhaps put the motion, I think, unless we've got someone else.
Through the chair, Mayor Bill, just one comment regarding the Audit and Risk Committee. I concur that public consultation won't hurt in this instance. However, there will be a further report to the Audit Committee with the second draft budget. It's the usual practice, and any any risks, which is a key platform that Ross Haslam focuses on, that emerge through the public consultation and a redirection of funds, in particular staffing arrangements and industrial ramifications through the enterprise agreement, would then flow through to the Audit and Risk Committee with the next report around what happened during public consultation.
Thanks very much, June. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Michael?
Sorry, so just to be clear, with the 2%, I'm not giving any direction to council on how to achieve it, and I'm not suggesting that council needs to reduce full-time employees to achieve it, but my personal view is that it's there somewhere. And as we're reminded often, we're at the top of the pyramid, so I'm not saying, buy less staples this year, but what I am saying is I think there's savings to be found that can be directed to projects that the community actually wants, and that's what the motion's about.
Thanks very much, Councillor Michael. We're probably exhausted the discussion, so I might put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously, councillors, and thank you very much, Councillor Michael, for your in-depth motion and well considered, well thought out and considered also. I've always thought this council could be the best council I've been mayor of, and I think tonight's discussion and outcomes probably go a fair way in sort of establishing that fact. So well done, everybody, and I think we've come to a really good conclusion. Something that we can take out now to our residents and our ratepayers and our other folk that live in our region, and hopefully we'll have some input into it. That's always a difficult process, of course, extracting sort of comments from a wide population, which we have, but at least we can give it a go, and we're showing publicly that we're prepared to do that, and I think that's probably more than most of our neighbours would do. So well done, councillors, and on that basis, I can close tonight's meeting and declare tonight's meeting closed. And thank you for being here. And hopefully we can stay on for a workshop now conducted by Craig and I think Lauren in relation to the railway precinct, a report that council asked for some months ago.